Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dashna Veeraputran. Today, the topic I've chosen is children with attention deficit hyperactive disorder are known to have difficulty with their working memory. Will taking Ritalin increase the performance of working memory in children with ADHD? What are the strengths and weaknesses of this assertion? Can you conclude whether the literature provides support for this assertion? So, the objectives of my presentation are to define working memory, also to explain how Ritalin, which is also known as methylphenidate (MPH), functions. I will also be talking about the strengths and weaknesses of the evidence that I've selected, and I will also give my stance on the topic in the conclusion. So, what is working memory? Working memory is the part of the memory system that allows us to mentally work with, manipulate information being held in short-term memory. So how does Ritalin function? So Ritalin works by boosting extracellular levels of dopamine and norepinephrine receptors by inhibiting their transporters. So an increase in dopamine improves attention and reduces distractibility. So it's been said that children who are diagnosed with ADHD have trouble with cognitive functions, which are mainly in the executive functions. So executive functions aids in increasing performance in challenging tasks, which involve processes such as working memory. So let's move on to source 1. So source 1, in this case study, 14 boys with an ADHD diagnosis and 12 controls with no diagnosis of ADHD was studied using functional magnetic resonance imaging, also known as fMRI. So each participant was tested 2 times, once with MPH and once without. So in order to measure working memory performance, the participants were given 3 N-back tasks with an increasing load which occurred during functional imaging. So during the challenging 2 and 3 back tasks, the boys with ADHD underperformed compared to the controls. However, upon the admission of MPH, there was an improvement in the performance of the boys with ADHD. It was also concluded that the challenging tasks were more sensitive to MPH. Next, moving on to source 2. So, source 2, where 32 adults participated in a trial where half the participants received MPH while the other half were given a placebo. So this occurred in a randomized double-blind system. So participants were presented with increasingly longer sequence of digits. They had to type on the screen right after the series were shown to them. The scores in these 2 task versions were combined to a total digit span score, which served them as a measure of an executive ability, particularly working memory. So, it was stated that there was a higher DigiSpan test score achieved in the group that was given MPH compared to the placebo. So, MPH is able to increase cognitive performance. However, it is not relative to ADHD, as based on the results, the DigiSpan test score also increased in the placebo group when they were given MPH. So this means that the MPH is not relative to ADHD as it improved performance for both groups. Moving on to source 3. So in source 3, the objective of the study was to investigate the effect of stimulant medication, such as MPH, on different components of visual spatial working memory in children diagnosed with ADHD. So a sample of children with the diagnosis of ADHD were made to complete different tasks of visual spatial memory, for example, planning ability, recognition, and recognition memory also, and they were all given 3 fixed doses of MPH. So, this study was conducted in a randomized double-blind placebo-controlled trial and crossover trial. So it was found that MPH decreased errors on a self-ordered computerized visual spatial working memory task. So this is because MPH affects the right hemisphere brain more, where components of visual spatial memory are located. These also improve brain processes such as working memory. Moving on to the evaluation of the evidence, I will now talk about the strengths and weaknesses of the articles that I've selected. So, one of the strengths are there was a random allocation of participants. So this means it minimizes bias as all participants had an equal chance of taking part in each condition. The next, there were no confounding factors, which means that all the factors were basically controlled, which means it couldn't divert the data. There was no external factor affecting the data. Moving on to the weaknesses, for source 1, there was no placebo condition involved. So if no placebo, that means it was hard to compare the ADHD group. Therefore, it decreases the effectiveness of the drug. For source 2, there was no assessment performed to confirm the diagnosis of ADHD of the participants. This could mean that some participants may not fit the diagnosis of ADHD, which could reduce the reliability of the study. Source 3. The trial that was conducted on a small sample. So this limits the effects of the drugs, as the effects of MPH may differ in people of different age and gender. So in conclusion, the 3 sources showed that MPH improved working memory. So for my stance, I choose to agree that MPH increases the working memory in children with ADHD, which is what I'll focus on in my essay. These are my references. Thank you.